folks. Hello and welcome, and thank you for taking the time to attend the first Executive Fireside Chat of 2021. My name is Anthony O'Callaghan. I'm the current chairman of a not-for-profit technology-focused organisation here in Cork, Ireland, called ITA Cork, and I'm also the current CIO of the Carberry Group. I also wanted to give a massive thank you to KPMG, our sponsors for these events since they started in 2020. And as always, throughout our events today, like in the previous ones that we've done, we'll be opening them for Q&A throughout. So feel free to drop in your questions as we go, and we'll do our best to address them as we go throughout the day. So I wanted to kick off, and this is quite a mouthful, by introducing today's executive. And so I wanted to introduce Bipul Sinha. He is an entrepreneur, an engineer, a venture capitalist with over 20 years experience building billion-dollar companies. He's now the CIO or CEO of the unicorn startup Rubrik, and he's also the board chairman and co-founder of Confluera and a venture partner of Lightspeed. So welcome, Bipul, and thank you for giving your very valuable time to us to do this event today.
Thank you, Anthony. Nice to be here. Can you hear me all right?
Absolutely, we can hear you. I think. So Bipul, just to get started, look, I have to admit, look, I'm a massive fan of Rubrik. The product, you know, we're evaluating this in Carberry in late 2020, and you know, the team here, like John and Emmett and Core, you know, they're doing you proud here in Cork. I suppose, look, you know, in order to get started, you know, how are you doing? How has COVID been treating you and the family, etc.? It's been a bit of a whirlwind over the past, you know, 14 to 18 months, I suppose.
COVID has been a very unreal experience. I'm sure for everybody around the world, it's been the same. And what it has really made all of us realize is that we are as good and as safe as the lowest common denominator, irrespective of the socioeconomic strata you belong to. So there is a universality, the realization of the universality that has happened with COVID, that we have to take care of our neighbors and colleagues and overall people around the world. And we need to have equal footing on healthcare because nobody is safe unless all of us are safe.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Bipul, I might just kind of throw just one admin item. Your video is frozen. You might just, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of stop it and start it there again, and hopefully that might correct it.
Let me see if I can.
No issue.
Let me see if I can. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. Yeah.
For some reason, my video is not turning on. It was on and it has gone off.
There's no issue.
If I can.
There we go.
Can you see me all right?
Absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect. Thanks for that, Bipul.
No worries at all. So, so we were talking about the COVID. So, and that realization of all of us are in this thing together has really brought this level of awareness and also kindness in all of us. I mean, in like over a weekend, we went like 1,500-1,600 people of Rubrik went from physical to digital.
Yeah. And
the way we have come together as a team, the way we have served our more than 3,000 customers worldwide, and the way we have collaborated, we learned a lot of things. And more importantly, we realized that the customer focus, customer obsession, understanding how the landscape is transforming and how we can better serve our customer by accelerating with them has served us well so far.
And I suppose even for yourselves, like a lot of companies as well, it made the company feel a lot smaller. You know, it's kind of brought everyone a bit closer, right? And, you know, challenging all of the norms that you know, we thought might not have been possible, you know, pre-COVID, right? So I think it was a massive learning for everybody, right? I think for us, certainly, it kind of really helped us as we went through the various stages of COVID. It kind of really helped us understand, you know, when to panic versus when not to panic, right? And we kind of got much better as we kind of went through the various stages of COVID, right? So, you know, Bipul, just to jump over to your career, right? And, you know, as I said, like that's quite a career you've had, right? Over, you know, let's call it quite a period of time, right? And while you've achieved an awful lot, clearly you're only I get a feeling that you're only getting started, right? So, I have to say, this is our first fireside chat of 2021, right? And I'm genuinely ecstatic to kind of kick it off with you, right? So from a software engineer to Lightspeed to the CEO of and co-founder of, a plus $3 billion company, right? That's quite a journey. Would you mind kind of taking us through that journey? Because I know I say engineer, but you weren't any old engineer, right? A lot of patents behind you, etc., right? So, would you mind kind of taking us through that journey of your career?
For sure. So I grew up in India, like many Indian immigrants to the US. I went to America to actually do software engineering work. I was at Oracle for many years, building Oracle database kernel. So I was initially like an engineer building concurrency control and transactional recovery, parallel distributed transactions. And then I rose up to become manager director of the team. And what really Oracle taught me was, in spite of a big company, there was a lot of focus on like high quality engineering work and also building products that can increase the top line of the company. So it got me chance to understand how to build product, how to do operations, how to accelerate product into the marketplace. But I didn't realize back then how much impact it will have in my career. In fact, at that time, I used to think that I stayed at Oracle for too long. And I went to do business school at Wharton. So I studied finance and became a venture capitalist, and I started to invest in technology companies. One of the first companies I invested in was Nutanix, where I was the first investor, first board member. I was also involved with Hootsuite. I was also part of the deal team that invested in Snapchat. One of my partners, who was the lead investor, brought me into a meeting, said that, hey, let's do the investigation together. There's a company where the photo disappears, and there were just two guys at Stanford. So being in venture capital, it keeps you humble because you see a lot of things that go on to become very large companies. You miss on some opportunities. I remember meeting Twilio in the Series A timeframe, and there was no consensus whether how big Twilio can become. So again, keeps you humble. Learned a lot about from looking at businesses holistically in terms of product, engineering, market, sales, how to kind of take risk and then mitigate risk by really doing certain things around product strategy, go-to-market strategy, things like that. Yeah. And then I felt like back 7 years ago that all my learnings about product and engineering plus venture capital finance, maybe I'm just preaching and I should be doing what I preach. And I thought I should take a chance and go start a company and call it immigrants chutzpah, call it entrepreneur zeal. In the last 7 years, Rubrik has gone from an idea with 4 people that we started the company to over 1,600 employees, product installed in 55 countries, over 3,000 customers, $600-700 million run rate, and continue to scale the business. So we've been very lucky. And a lot of great people came to support us on this journey, and we are just starting up.
It's amazing, and I think like that was one of the kind of things that jumped into my mind. I think you just touched on it there, right? So, in your role as a venture capitalist, and then moving across into being the CEO, right? Kind of in that role as a VC, being a mentor, etc., and now kind of taking that jump across to being a CEO. It was like, what triggered that? I suppose. Well, initially, kind of how much courage did you need to have to make that jump, right? But was it a case where it was a niche that you needed to scratch, if you know what I mean, right? And just prove yourself that you can do it, right?
No, I mean that's a really good question. And so if you look at the journey, folks go from being entrepreneur, and then last step of their journey is to be a venture capitalist. And I took a different route where I first became venture capitalist, and then I went into entrepreneurship. There is a difference between venture capital and an entrepreneur. The difference is, as venture capitalists, you always think about the downside. In terms, because you are looking at like hundreds of opportunities, and then you have to pick one in a year, 2 in a year to invest. So if you're overly optimistic, then you can't just eliminate so many, right? It's a hard job. So most of the time you look for reasons that's why something would not work. So that's the venture capitalist perspective. Entrepreneur's perspective is that entrepreneurs have a portfolio of one.
Yeah.
So you have to be very, very optimistic in terms of like, you go out there and make an impact. You go out there and make your idea a reality, translate into the product, convince people to buy it. So if you look at the human state, human beings have two states, a state of will and a state of intellect. You plan, you create budgets, you create plan, you design your strategy in the state of intellect. And then you go execute on it in the state of will, where you go out and just strike hard and not take no for an answer and just keep driving.
Yeah.
So venture capitalists operate in the state of intellect. Entrepreneurs operate in the state of will. So that mental transformation from being somebody who's looking at the downside and figuring out what is the biggest risk adjusted outcome that you could create, it means that you have to take risk, but what is the best outcome you could create versus have one idea and whatever it takes. That was the big mindset shift. But on the positive side, the biggest thing that I learned as a venture capital is this is the most risky asset class. So when you take capital from venture capitalists, you have to generate growth by taking risk. So in Rubrik's journey, I really took that to heart, and to accelerate the business, I always created like 10 to 15% of total capital that I raised as a super high risk capital that I should experiment with to accelerate the business. And that has served us well.
And you know, you touched on a point that I was kind of stalking you over the last few weeks, right, and kind of reading your background, et cetera, right? But when I look back at the early days of Rubriks, right, and you kind of touched on that risk, you know, let's say your approach to VMworld back in the day, the very early days, and getting the product ready to launch, et cetera, right? How important is it to kind of really take those risks? Is that important just at the early stages of the company, or is that something that you kind of translate throughout the life cycle of the company to where you are today, that there is still that 10 to 15% that you keep in that risk category?
So at different stage in the company, you have to take different risks. So in the earliest stage of the company, you really don't have any assets because this your product, your ideas, everything has no revenue, no real business. Yeah. So you have to be most disruptive when you have nothing. So in the early days, when you're building the product, you're selling the first 50 customers, you are going out there and taking the highest amount of risk. And once you cross the hurdle and get into kind of early majority, call it like 100, 200, 500 customers, then you have an asset because you know that the asset has value, the idea has value. Yeah. So then you have to be a little bit moderated in your disruption because you could kill the thing that you have created. Yeah. So you have to transition from asset creator, which is a disruptor, to an asset manager, which is the second phase of the company. And so the mindset and risk taking has to change. You cannot take highly disruptive risk because you could kill the business that you have created. But you always have to take risk because the risk profile in terms of once you build the initial product and when you enter the market with the initial product, the time compression of the commoditization cycle is so fast that you have to constantly evolve the product. So you have to constantly take risk. But the amount of risk you take, which is with the customers that you already have, is different than the initial disruption risk.
Absolutely. Yeah, and look, it makes complete sense. And I think it's interesting as well, kind of going from the VC into the CEO, because I suppose the norm would be CEO to VC, and I suppose having that VC experience behind you kind of helps drive that kind of risk kind of mentality. And it's calculated risks, of course, right? It's not risk for risk's sake, right? But I suppose just kind of touching on that, you know, the CEO or founder's journey, right? You know, during your time at Lightspeed, just to take us a step back a little bit, right? You know, you've seen a lot of, you know, founders come and go, I suppose, right? In all these companies, right? In your opinion, you know, what are the traits of, you know, a successful founder, and what are some of the common mistakes that founders make time and time again?
See, the thing is that as venture capitalist, what you focus on is a market and a founding team or founder. The combination of the two makes the magic. The real question is that is the person that you are betting on, particularly because market, you can go do the research, you have intuition, you have prior knowledge, whatever, you can kind of put your finger on it in your own
Yeah.
way. There may not be perfect market data, but you can put your finger on it. But persons evaluating a founder is the hard part. And there is no one prototypical entrepreneur. There are entrepreneurs who are very bombastic, but extremely good. There are entrepreneurs who are very quiet, but very determined, very driven, extremely good. So there is no one kind of a prototypical entrepreneur. The common denominator that you want to look for is this tenacity, this grit. And what I did was I used to look at somebody's life experience and see that have they seen adversity in their life and what did they do to overcome that adversity. So it's all about the narrative, because at some level is the story that we tell about ourselves, to us as well as to the outside world. And if the person has life experience that demonstrates grit, and that is the biggest determinant, because at the end of the day, you only take risk, venture capital risk, to an entrepreneur who is going to go make impossible possible.
Absolutely.
And in the impossible possible category, the best friend is the grit.
And I suppose as a VC then, right, and sorry, but you're triggering more questions for me as well, which is great, right? But as a VC, when you're looking at these kind of investments, right, how much of it is an investment in the team versus an investment in the product?
So it's very hard. I mean, I used to do early stage investments and there is no product per se. We used to give people money to go build the product.
Yeah.
So you look at the market, because look, the risk and the effort to attack a large market is same as the risk and effort to attack a small market.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure that there is a large market, so that the price of the success is high. If the price of the success is low, then what's the point?
Yeah.
So that's number one. You don't compromise on the market. And market doesn't have to exist today, but the potential market has to be big. So some people call it $0 billion market. It means that the market will be multiple billion, but today is zero. But you are going to create a market. So the market has to be big. But market big is not a sufficient condition. It is a necessary condition. The sufficient condition is big market and an amazing founding team that have an unfair advantage because of some know-how, not expert level know-how, some know-how and extreme grit.
Fantastic. I love that piece around kind of looking for how they overcome adversity in their lives, right? It's something I hadn't heard in the past, but it's something that could apply through every business, I suppose, when you're looking for these innovative entrepreneurs, right? I absolutely love it. So just jumping over to Rubrik then for a second, right? You know, I hear it referred to as a startup. You know, with revenues and valuations where they are, right? You know, do you still consider yourselves a startup, and at what point does it make that flip from a startup and grow beyond it, right? Is there a natural inflection point?
So, I mean, you are right. I mean, at our scale, we are a mid-size and growing company. We are not like a startup. But also a startup there is no fixed definition of a startup. In my mind, a startup is a state of mind. And the state of mind is that how you create a framework of speed into your business. Yeah. That's the startup mindset. Startups have no natural advantage against large companies. I would say startups have all the disadvantage against a large company. The only advantage that the startups have is the speed.
Yeah.
The speed of decision making, the speed of market reaction, the speed of market learning, the speed of articulation, the speed of hiring people. And if you look at all the aspects of the speed, that's what creates an unfair advantage for a startup. So if you are a startup and if you are a growing, and if at some point you lose that, call it mojo. If you lose that mojo, you will not succeed. I mean, you will become an ordinary company. Yeah. So even if you inflect at some point into a mid-sized growing company, you still need to have that entrepreneurial energy and entrepreneurial sense of urgency um, to kind of continue to drive the business, because it's still in a large market potential, you want to go and exploit the opportunity to the fullest extent.
And you know, that's something that I suppose, when we were evaluating Rubriks, one thing that really impressed us was the speed of the products kind of coming to market, right? And it wasn't, you know, obviously very, very well thought out products and very enterprise grade products, but it was the speed of the agility of the company, right? So how do you kind of protect that kind of speed from, you know, as the company grows, how do you make sure that you don't lose that agility as well, right? And you kind of keep that startup spirit. Is that a constant battle as the company continues to grow?
Absolutely. I mean, see, the thing is that when we started Rubrik, before we hired a single employee, we actually created a cultural framework. Because how do you tell people what is expected of you when you work at Rubrik? And so we said that the rivet is the cultural value of Rubriks. R of the rivet is relentlessness. I of the rivet is integrity. V of the rivet is velocity. E of the rivet is excellence. And T of the rivet is transparency. So we actually created that foundational framework before we hired our first employee. And then when we started growing, there was a year that we hired like 500 people in the company, and all hell broke loose because when you double the size of the company, half of the company is new, half of the people don't know what you're talking about in terms of the cultural framework. So we have had significant challenges in terms of maintaining the culture. So it's kind of like a roller coaster. You push, then you drop, then you push and you drop. And that's the nature of the cultural framework. Even at Amazon's scale today, every Amazon office has a signage with respect to the management principles, because you have to be constantly reminded, because human mind is not ready to kind of accept a thing in one go or in a short period of time. Human mind is also downward sloping. So how do you kind of keep it high? The only way to keep it high is to repeat. And we have tried to kind of really created examples of transparency by doing open board meetings. Absolutely. We have created examples of velocity by saying no more than 2 meetings on any topic. Don't have analysis paralysis. As long as we make more than 50% right decision, we'll live to fight another day. So it's just the constant reinforcement, but by no means perfect.
Yeah, and I love that, because I was reading a little bit about the transparency being so important, and maintaining that throughout the growth of Rubriks with the open board meetings, etc. Right? It just seems like such a, you know, I suppose, a very welcoming and transparent type approach, right, to, you know, all your employees, right? And it's something that you seem to have maintained throughout the life cycle of the company to date, and it seems to be kind of one of your guiding kind of, let's say, stances in terms of how the company should operate, and it's on complete transparency, right, which is, you know, fantastic in times like today, right? And I suppose, just kind of jumping back, when you were talking earlier, right, around your early days as an engineer, you were saying a kind of, you know, you had that experience back then around, you know, what it meant to build a good product and how it impacted the bottom line, etc. Right? So when I kind of think about Rubriks, right, you know, what's the difference between, you know, a great product and a great company, right? You know, or your opinion on that, because I suppose it's not enough just to have great tech. You kind of have to have a great company overall, and the culture and everything like that comes into it, right?
So see, the thing is that any journey or so if you think about starting a company, and if you want to start and build like a long-term company, you have to create an enduring institution. So if you're creating an enduring institution, you need to have some framework for the institution, some things that are accepted, some things are not. So that's the cultural foundational framework. But cultural foundational framework is just a container. You have to fill the container with the substantial ingredient that makes it successful. And the ingredient is people and technology. The two things that makes this magic happen. And as far as the technology or product is concerned, and this is something that I thought about for a very long time, because as a venture capitalist, you think about like which companies will succeed and why, and market, and which will not. I have a firm belief that that every company should have an idea which is a controversial idea, because because you cannot build a disproportionate value on an idea that is commonly accepted.
Yeah.
Because if the idea is commonly accepted, it means that a lot of people are doing it. It means that there is no value in doing it.
Yeah.
So this is paradoxical.
Yeah.
So when you pitch your idea to 10 people and only 2 people agree with your idea and agree wholeheartedly and strongly, then you should go do it. If all 10 people agree to it, it means that there is no value.
Fantastic.
So if you think about Rubrik, what is our controversial idea? The controversial idea about Rubrik is the simplicity. We felt that backup and recovery product as it existed in the market in 2013 was too complex. Why would I buy 3 or 4 different hardware software components to build an ERP-like system which just sits there waiting for something bad to happen? It's like you're buying an insurance policy with so many fine prints that you don't know whether if you have a car accident, you will ever get paid or your family will ever get paid. So our idea was that if we take these 4 or 5 pieces of hardware software component and completely collapse it and create a policy-driven, simple automated platform where nobody has to read a manual to operate a Rubrik.
Yeah.
And our goal was that if somebody can do Facebook, they can do Rubrik. That was the secret sauce. It's a very simple thing to say that I'm making the simplicity as the goal of the product, but truly, simplicity is what made Rubrik Rubrik.
Yeah, and I can definitely tell you from when we evaluated this in 2020, that was the piece that really kind of, let's say, opened our eyes. It's kind of really cool to kind of see that, like, back in 2013, that was your vision. It's still in place here in 2021, right? That was the one piece that kind of really opened our eyes. It was the simplicity, that it wasn't multiple products that were just stitched together or forced together, right? It was the pure simplicity of how the whole end-to-end ecosystem kind of tied together, right? And the ability for you didn't have to be deep technically to be able to kind of use it as well, right? And look, that's beautiful for some of the IT professionals coming into the market as well today, right? That we just want this simplicity, right? So it's really cool to kind of hear that has kind of stayed throughout the life cycle of the company as well, right? And Bipul, then from a customer perspective, right? So the customer feedback and us having experienced that whole evaluation engagement with your company, right? It was a fairly seamless kind of process. Obviously, you guys have invested an awful lot in terms of that customer success, et cetera, right? Is that a core kind of pillar of Rubrik as well in terms of how you guys engage with customers, and it's not just about a sale?
So see, the thing is that IT infrastructure or IT or any kind of technology purchase world has completely transformed in the last 15 years. Essentially, with the advent of blogging and social media, people are not meeting our sales teams to learn about the product. People are learning about the product on their own. And in many cases, they may know more about the product from a usage perspective than some of our own team members. So the game for us is different. The game for us is to provide our customer an understanding of the strategy of the business, how we'll be with you as the technology evolves. Can we be your strategic IT partner, IT vendor for the next 10, 15 years of your journey? How do you take complex problem of cloud, complex problem of data security, complex problem of data compliance, and how we can create a platform that can solve that problem for you? So the business has gone from the basic understanding of the product and capabilities to really understanding and delivering business strategy component that drives your business forward. And so if you think about that perspective, and if you map back, you have to first build a product that your initial set of customers will just love. And only a small set you have to sell to believers, because in the early days there is not many believers, and that is by design. So you have to find the critical mass of believers and take their feedback and build the product. And it is magical. I mean, one thing that I'll tell you from my own experience, so many people come with you on this journey, and literally they get no benefit out of company building. They are just living vicariously through you, through an entrepreneur, because they want to see this idea succeed. And that's the beauty of our ecosystem. That's the beauty of our customers and partners in the early days. And then what you do is when you sell your product has lots of problems in the early days because it just came out of your lab. And then the friendly and forgiving customers will give you the opportunity to quickly fix things. That's where the customer service orientation in the engineering team, building a customer success team, having a sales team which is less focused on selling, more focused on understanding and making customers successful. And those are the things that come together to kind of build a company. And what you do is you don't lose it. So even today, our goal number 1, 2, 3 is to make the customer successful. We always tell people selling is only 5% of the job. 95% of the job is when our product gets installed and starts to get used.
Yeah, and I think for sure for us, right, when we're looking at new vendors, it's super important that we understand, where the company is going in terms of that roadmap and how do you kind of keep us on the bleeding edge, et cetera, right? And, I think that's something that we kind of really got a good sense from kind of working with you and the team, as well as that it wasn't static. It's not like you install this, you're done. There's nothing else kind of coming at it. It was kind of felt like a bit of a journey rather than just, another standard customer vendor type relationship, right? Which is awesome. So can I just change tack for a little sec just around COVID, right? We didn't really touch on COVID a lot. It's like the elephant in the room, right? So, if I think about, look, you're based in California. Obviously it's been a hub of kind of tech innovation in recent years. And I remember when I was working there, back in 2012, 2013, right? There was a trend emerging where companies were looking outside, Austin and Houston and elsewhere, right? What's your take on California, Silicon Valley, right? Do you see COVID impacting that going forward when you have a lot of kind of big tech companies now coming out with this, remote working forever and all that kind of stuff? How do you see that kind of changing the tech hubs, right? Obviously Silicon Valley being the biggest, most famous one out there, right?
I think the cost of living in Silicon Valley has made it prohibitive for companies to really kind of operate at a scale, because the combination of a very tight talent market, particularly around engineering, and if you combine that with high cost of living, it's a very explosive combination. Having said that, in my view, the Silicon Valley has, in some ways, call it cultural, call it just stories that we tell ourselves and all of that, has created this unique combination of talent, but not just talent, but talent mobility. Capital, universities, and then just risk tolerance. And this combination makes Silicon Valley unique, because what it does is that think about when Rubrik started, we could attract 50, 100 people who were ready to take chance on a company which didn't even have a website or a name. So that mindset is a very cultural thing. And so even if you have people working remotely and not all your employees are in Silicon Valley and all of that, but creating that mindset is not a 1 or 2 year, 5 year thing. It's a 50-year thing. And 50 years of very sustained effort. So I would say the news of demise of Silicon Valley is too premature. I think, I mean, look, technology is getting all pervasive. Technology is getting in every aspects of our lives. As a result, there is more need for people to build technology. Only Silicon Valley cannot contain and keep all the software engineers. You'll have software engineering everywhere in the world, including Cork, Ireland, where you are. And it is very, very good because it creates the conditions of the Silicon Valley and builds the foundation of Silicon Valley in the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years. There will be companies coming out of these places. And so it's general goodness. But if you think about the starting of like companies when it requires the high quality talent mobility and capital and risk taking, that thing takes time to develop.
And it's interesting because it's very similar. We were talking on one of these fireside chats back in late 2020. We had the CTO of Flex, and we had a VP of we had the VP of Talent Services within LinkedIn, and they're both based in Mountain View. And we were asking them a very similar question, right? They were saying it's similar to yourself. It's about the ecosystem, which is very, very hard to replicate that. Right? Even as you mentioned, look, you have the startups, you have the universities, etc. And when you put all that together, it's a very, very difficult ecosystem to replicate. In a virtual environment, right? So I think it's interesting, but it's interesting as well how it kind of pops up every couple of years, right? That Silicon Valley is overheated, and it just continues, right? It just continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think, look, it'll just emerge from COVID, maybe in a different model, but it won't be the end of it, right? I think it's, it just pops up time and time again.
I will tell you one thing, Anthony, and this is also from personal experience, is remote working is great, but the remote working works in the stage 2 phase of the startup.
Yeah.
In the stage 1 phase, when you are in the most intense innovation product building state, the proximity and density plays a huge role. I remember in the early days of Rubrik, we just had one room at our Lightspeed office, which was our venture capitalist office. And we had 13 people, 13 engineers in that room. There was not enough oxygen in that room, to be honest. And me and my assistant were the two overhead because there was no product to sell. And I was the recruiter and she was the coordinator. And they threw us out of the room. So we used to go sit in the lobby while they were writing code. But the intensity of product building and innovation that I experienced in that one room was incredible.
Yeah.
Because there was zero cost of communication.
Yeah.
You just sit there and just shout across the room and everybody was talking, and then the speed of innovation was very, very high. In the second stage, we went into the still one room, but a big hall, which was 3 times bigger than that original room. And we packed that room again. We kept hiring people and kept packing the room, and productivity kept going up. But at some point, it becomes a chaos. But the density was really our friend in the early days. We would not have product built in like 12 months to the first customer dollar in 13 months in Rubrik if we're not in a high density, small place environment. So I personally don't feel that the collaboration, there's just the friendship, just the people coming together with a common goal, band of like brothers and sisters together, is very hard to do in the early days. And that's why I feel like Silicon Valley has a unique advantage of like getting something started. Just the spark, the initial spark is hard to create in a remote or environment or place where the risk taking is not as prevalent.
I might kind of dig into that a little bit, because there's a great question after coming in from Caroline Dowling, right? So I suppose you kind of had that, I suppose that drive, etc., because you had so many people in the room, as you mentioned, right? And you were able to churn a good product very, very quickly, right? And there's nothing like that kind of human contact, right? So in the world that we're in today with COVID, right? I mean, how do you continue to maintain that, as Caroline asked, right? That creativity and camaraderie in a very virtual world, right? That we're all stuck in this whole remote working world for the moment. How do you continue to kind of keep that drive and momentum up?
So there are two pieces to it. So in the remote environment, you don't have the random interactions. There is no random hallway chat. There is no random water cooler chat. It's all about very organized meetings, and organization is the killer of creativity and booster of productivity. So the productivity, it feels like, has gone up, at least in my own case. But my own creativity feels like it's gone down because I don't have that many like random interactions. But having said that, folks are figuring out their own ways to create the random events. So I've heard folks are doing like join random Zoom meetings. There is like random breakout rooms that we folks are creating. In fact, our own senior leadership meeting, the person who runs the senior leadership meeting created a random breakout room where different executives were in different rooms and came up with different topics of kind of things that to do in the new fiscal year, things like that. So we are still in the early days of figuring out creativity in the virtual world on a remote setting, but I don't think we have hit the jackpot on that yet.
And I think it's interesting as well to watch, I suppose if you surveyed employees during the very early days of COVID, saying, would you like remote working, hybrid, or back in the office? It would probably be very weighted on the remote working and hybrid. But, certainly what we're seeing over here is that it's now starting to tilt right back. Like maybe it's because it's winter, etc. But it's like people are now tilting back into towards missing that kind of face-to-face contact and more moving back into the office environment, right? So I think it's just interesting to kind of see how that journey has progressed, right? But I'd certainly be a fan of the face-to-face contact, right, in terms of getting stuff done. And it's the creativity piece that I think most people are struggling with, as you mentioned, right? And so thanks for that, Bipul. So just, sticking with COVID again, right, around, like you mentioned, around the employees, et cetera, right? As we continue in this kind of remote working environment and, employees, have more choice because employers are hiring remotely, et cetera, right? Do you think that, that'll drastically change employee kind of loyalty, or we'll see a significant uptake in, numbers of people moving jobs, et cetera, as those opportunities emerge now that remote working is accepted on a large scale at the moment? Do you think that will have a significant impact on employee loyalty?
I definitely, again, so taking a step back, I feel like particularly for the tech industry, given how much wealth creation, how much opportunity creation has happened or is happening in the last 20 years, the people who work in the tech industry, they don't have a dearth of opportunities and jobs. And so the way you manage your people, your colleagues, is not about having a job. Everybody has two other offers. So you have to really create an environment where you give everybody an opportunity to express themselves to their fullest.
Yeah.
And there's no artificial hurdle in their success. So that's given. So I don't think the loyalty is that big a part of the equation, because the loyalty game has changed in the tech industry. It's all about experience, working experience, and like growth experience, whether it's career growth or personal growth or skill set growth, but some growth experience combined with this fun environment there where they are creative. So I don't think that will fundamentally change. What will change is that at scale, there will be a huge disaggregation of labor in the tech industry. So if you think about going beyond the early, call it zero. So if you're going to Peter Thiel's parlance, it's 0 to 1 and 1 to n. So in the 0 to 1 state, when you're creating something, the locality matters.
Yeah.
But in the 1 to n state, when you have large company and distributed workforce and people working everywhere, there you will have a disaggregation of labor, and that will do two things. It will break down the concept of headquarter and growth orientation, like career growth based on proximity to headquarter. That thing will go away.
Yeah.
And you will have equally influential people all over the world, and an acceptance of virtual presence.
Yeah, yeah.
So what that will do is that will create opportunities in places where there is a location disadvantage. So if you think about somebody sitting in Kansas City in America, will have a tech company opportunity that somebody in Silicon Valley enjoys.
Yeah.
And that will create more awareness, that will create more of a community. Again, fast forward 10, 20, 30 years, you will have a broader set of tech people who will create technology in companies.
Yeah. And I think it's probably, as you can say, kind of trying to find a space, those employees that, are best suited to sitting in that 0 to 1 camp versus the employees that are really excited by the 1 to 100 type camp, right, and trying to find a place for people to kind of keep them engaged, right? And I suppose, people are probably figuring out through COVID what they really want to be involved in, right? What really gets them excited, right? It's no longer around just about the money, right? And it's not been about that, I suppose, for a long time for an awful lot of people as well, right? So trying to find, like, slotting people into those spots is super important, right? So, and I just wanted to flag to people as well as we go throughout the event, the Q&A is open as well, right? So feel free to throw in any questions as we go. So Bipul, I suppose, reading through your bio, et cetera, right? Obviously incredibly, well connected, sitting in the heart of Silicon Valley, right? I mean, what are you kind of seeing as, the tech sector in general, right? Where do you think is the next big kind of item that is going to come down the line, right? We've had cloud, we've had cyber, we've had cloud again, et cetera, right? What do you think is next?
See, the thing is that we are still seeing the early days of disaggregated computing. So if you look at the journey, you had mainframe, then personal computer, then from mini computer, then personal computer, then servers and cloud. But the thing that has fundamentally changed in the since iPhone is that you have billions of devices, billions of smart devices all over the place. And then if you think about billions of smart devices and now several billions of other devices which are not personal device, but from your fridge to your car to whatever, is now all aggregating and sending and processing data. So and just think about if you think about attack vectors, continuity of operations. So in my mind, there is going to be a significant opportunity created at the intersection of data and security.
Yeah.
And that's where, if you take the data and security, and if you layer artificial intelligence, if you layer quantum computing, these things will accelerate and bring down the cost of processing. And that's where the next level of innovation would happen. As the edges becomes more and more and more intelligent, and then you will drive like massive amount of productivity by giving the end user, end devices, end things like high intelligence to make local decisions.
And do you kind of buy into this concept as well, Bipul, of like, if we go into the area of kind of AI, et cetera, right? And any time we talk about, with some of the companies in IT at Cork, anytime in the IT departments they talk about AI and automation, et cetera, it's like the robots kind of taking over, right? Like, do you kind of buy into that whole kind of concept, right? Like there's alternative views, right? It's kind of freeing up people from the commoditized work to take on higher value add tasks. And then there's some genuine, let's say AI replacing people over time, or maybe creating new roles, et cetera, right? What's your kind of view there?
So there are two parts of the whole AI equation. So one part of the AI equation is the productivity gains. And I completely agree that the productivity gains would drive folks to higher and higher order bits. So for example, if you go back maybe 30 years, 20, 30 years, you had an office boy or office girl who'd take paper from one desk to the next. And then email came and replaced them with an electronic system. So that was the gain in productivity. In some ways, the machine took over.
Yeah.
But it's not that those people got unemployed. They went and did higher level stuff. So same thing will happen, that this kind of constant, like non-stop drive to productivity will drive people on a higher value work 100%. Rather than the lower value work. And that's the constant that is given. We live in this world where the world will constantly push people and push boundaries. Absolutely. Of anything that can be done by a machine or an algorithm will be done by a machine and an algorithm.
Yeah.
So and artificial intelligence will play some role in it. In my mind, artificial intelligence today is too dumb, in the sense that it is being used in solving very specific problem in a very specific way. The general purpose artificial intelligence, like Terminator style robot coming and killing us and taking over the world, I mean, that's crazy talk. These are the talk by people who have never written a single line of code. And I mean, we are like at least 100 years, if not more, away from any reality where machine intelligent enough to make decisions by themselves and gets more and more intelligent. What is possible is that well-programmed artificial intelligence algorithms can be used in like cyber threats where it self-propagates once it is lands in your environment, learns the environment's like so very specific use case where the artificial intelligence will make an impact. But I don't think robots replacing people is a near-term possibility.
Super. And Bipul, so I always have a bit of a curveball question, right, as part of these, and I'll apologize in advance, right? So like something completely different, right? So I ask you a little bit about crypto, right, as an alternative location for, you know, cash reserves, et cetera, right? So look, obviously there's an awful lot of talk at the moment from, you know, companies like Tesla and MicroStrategy betting big as a location to hold their cash reserves, et cetera, right? And, you know, there seems to be a bit of a trend at the moment kind of going there. And I'm sure if you invested in the last few days, you'd have very difficult questions to answer of your board, right? But what are you kind of seeing there in Silicon Valley, right? I mean, is it a bubble? Is there, you know, longevity behind it? I mean, what's your kind of take?
See, the thing is that I've been watching this whole crypto space, this whole Bitcoin from the early days. In fact, in 2013, we were involved in this space and we were looking at a lot of companies. We actually ended up investing in a company in UK called Blockchain Technology. I don't remember. So, so there are two parts to crypto. So one is this whole technology platform underpinning, which is a distributed ledger technology that you can make a distributed decision and do distributed transaction anonymously. That has significant use around contracts and a lot of areas like research, collaboration, things like that. But particularly the Bitcoin is a little bit of a libertarian idea that the fiat currency, which is the currency of different countries, since the monetary policies of the country can print more money, how do you protect yourself against countries printing dollars, and how do you create printing money, and how do you create a currency that doesn't dilute by whims and fancies of a particular government? So I think that is a dandy idea. What is unclear to me is what is the use case? Is the use case stored value, or the use case is a transactional value, like the transactional currency? What I see is that in developed economies where the methods of payments are many, the use of Bitcoin as a like transactional currency is limited, because folks have so many ways to make payments. Why find a new one? And then if you think about the stored value, the risk is too high for a stored value, because if you think of this as a gold replacement or a company's treasury, I don't know if the company can take that level of a risk by investing in Bitcoin. I mean, this is as if company can take a small part of their treasury and invest in private equity asset class because it has a high return. I mean, it can go high, it can go low. Bitcoin can go high, Bitcoin. So I don't know if the stored value with that much volatility is an asset class to invest. But I mean, I have been wrong many times and I'll be wrong again. But to me, the use case is not yet clear. Other than buying drugs on internet and passing currency across the border, I don't see a big use case for Bitcoin just yet.
I think it's very difficult, definitely for me at the moment, to, like yourself, to understand the use case when the volatility is there, right? You know, why would you, like, if you invested in it right now, why would you spend it? Because you might be thinking, is it going to be worth 2x?
Yeah.
You know, the value, or is it going to be worth less, right? And until that volatility calms down, it's very hard to imagine a use case for this, right? Because there's so many horror stories of, someone buying a pizza 10 years ago with 10,000 of them, right? And having to live with that, or live with that thought, right? No, but Bipul, that's very insightful. Thank you, right? And look, I know we're coming up towards the top of the hour, right? So look, the last question I have for you, right, is look, you've achieved obviously so much throughout your career, and look, as I said, to me, I get a sense you're only getting started. What's still on your bucket list to achieve?
I'm not someone who makes a lot of plans. If you look at my career and my career transitions, I've never kind of started something and planned like, okay, I'm becoming an engineer and I want to become a venture capitalist, or from venture capital, I want to go become an entrepreneur. I always think about today.
Yeah.
And all the opportunities that come my way today, I try to exploit and make best use of them. So I went from an engineer to a venture capitalist pretty much in a 2 months interval. Business school, and I thought that what do I want to do after business school? After I got into business school, and I saw venture capital as a great opportunity. In 2 months' time, I went and focused on it. So I don't make big plans because I feel that the world is too complex a place with too much random events and too much uncertainty that you can really think long term and build a plan of a particular thing. But if you live in today and if you say, what I could be doing today for a better tomorrow, the tomorrow will self-reveal.
I love that.
So to me, it feels like I'm living today and I'm trying my best today. And tomorrow will come and we'll all know together.
I love it. Super. So, Bipul, look, I just wanted to thank you. Look, I know there was a lot of interest kind of coming into this, and you 100,000% delivered, right? So, thank you very much for giving us your very valuable time and the very open and honest approach to this event, right? And also for, from all of us here in IT at Cork and the support that you've shown to Cork as well as a region as well. I wanted to kind of thank you on behalf of IT at Cork as well. So Bipul, thanks again. And I look forward to chatting in the future.
Thank you, Anthony. Real pleasure. And thank you for the opportunity. And we are very excited to be part of the Cork IT community, and we'll continue to grow and make a great impact together.
Fantastic. Bipul, thank you so much. And have a great week.
You too. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.